Welcome to the Gaggle where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Samueli. With me here today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. And it's Monday, Labor Day, and we are doing our live stream. So this is always very exciting.
No excuse not being.
No. We never take any time off. That's just the way. That's just the way we are. So it was very interesting today, by the by, that Russia, in the person of Dmitry Peskov, said that essentially Russia is supporting Kamala Harris for the presidency. They prefer Harris because she's more predictable than Trump is, because he said that, well, with the Democrats are generally more predictable, and so that applies, what we said about Biden applies to Harris. Now, the interesting thing about that is, first of all, I mean, we don't know whether the Russians are being serious or whether they're just simply having us on, but that it's not going to do anything to alter the trajectory of the stories that are forthcoming between now and November the 5th, which is just 2 months, that Russia is backing Trump. Russia is absolutely 100% all in for Trump. It doesn't matter how many times Russians are going to say, no, actually, we prefer Harris. We find Trump to be very unpredictable. That it doesn't matter. No. They are backing Trump. You can't do anything to alter the trajectory of that story.
Yeah, well, it's a fake out. Okay, they're faking out the Democrats, or actually helping Donald Trump by allowing Russiagate to visit Kamala Harris's door. I mean, it's a fake out. It's slightly amusing. At the end of the day, the Kremlin could care less who is in the White House. Okay, I mean that's very clear now. I mean, one administration after another, and the policy has always been the same, with maybe a couple nuances. Donald Trump may say something. It would be good to get along with the Russians, but he armed Ukraine, so he tried to overthrow the government of Venezuela. Okay, didn't have the wherewithal to get out of Syria. So I mean, who cares?
Yeah, no, I think that's right, and I think that what was different, and I think in 2016 they did have considerable hopes on Trump, because Trump was somebody outside the Washington bubble. He looked like somebody who would have a new way of looking at things, would be much more pragmatic, and he did say all those things during the campaign, where we should get on with Russia. However, Russia was really very disappointed in what happened under Trump, and I think since then they basically as you said, they have no preferences one way or the other. So it's much of a muchness. I mean, I do think though that they do probably find Trump to be particularly unpredictable. I think that aspect of it is true. I mean, we also find Trump to be very unpredictable. We just don't know what actually Trump has in his mind.
I have no idea. You have
no idea at all. And so it is very difficult to know what he talks to Orban, tells Orban one thing. Orban says, oh, yeah, he said he's ready to bring this war to an end really within 24 hours. He's essentially ready to cut Ukraine off from arms. And then he has Mike Pompeo hanging around him and say, oh, Pompeo is going to be part of the national security team. But you can't get any more hawkish than Pompeo and Lindsey Graham. So no one knows anything at all as to what he's going to do. And so therefore you could say, okay, I mean, that's true. I mean, to a certain extent about Harris, we have no idea because Harris has no ideas as to what Harris will do. But I think Trump is particularly unpredictable. And you can see, if you're a Russian leader, you don't know what Trump's going to do. I mean, Trump may well just come in and decide, you know what, I'm going to escalate and I think I can end this war just simply by escalating, because peace through stress and whatever.
I think Peskov is just taking a piss at the
Right,
election.
that's right.
And considering, and George and I have obviously chronicled this, is that Russiagate is alive and well. Okay, Russiagate will be part of this election cycle too. Okay, all the figment of the Democratic Party's imagination.
Yes, yes, no, that's very true. It's very interesting, and I only skimmed through it, but there's a very long article in Rolling Stone about Igor Danchenko, and then our friend Hans Manke kind of recorded a video about this Rolling Stone article, and Hans said, look, there's obviously an agenda here. I can't quite figure out what the agenda. Why resuscitate the whole Igor Danchenko case now? But there's obviously something there. I mean, why suddenly write this very long article about somebody who was a very peripheral figure? I mean, we know that he was just an absolutely minor figure who only got into this whole thing because Christopher Steele was kind of forced to say, well, he had to name somebody who's your source. So he named Danchenko. And of course, when the FBI realized, well, Danchenko is someone, he's based in Washington. So how can you have some Kremlin insider who presumably is feeding you all this key information when your most important source is actually in DC? So that's how the FBI got onto Danchenko. But then rather than abandon Russiagate and Steele, they did the opposite, and they made Danchenko a confidential human source and thereby took him out of circulation. So nobody knew anything about him, and Congress couldn't get to him because they were investigating the Steele dossier. And then later, only subsequently, we kind of found out, a lot of internet sleuths kind of figured out who the source was. But basically, then and then they prosecuted Danchenko, which again, he was a peripheral figure. But so it's very interesting. Why suddenly bring out Danchenko 2 months out from the election?
Exactly. It's a gift that keeps on giving. Okay.
Right.
And it seems now this is part of the third presidential election cycle. It seems to be a permanent feature now.
Right. Yes, no, it really does. And so, but that's why, I mean, and we talked yesterday about Robert Reich, and Reich, again, first of all, Reich made that loony article about how, calling for the arrest, nothing short of that, the arrest of Elon Musk. But again, he's saying somehow Musk is going to be used by the Russians in order to help Putin. Just make these ridiculous assertions. But it's still interesting. I mean, the Russiagators. Russiagators have enjoyed senior positions within the Biden administration. I mean, that's kind of, it's not just sort of pundits who are peddling nonsense about Russiagate, but Lisa Monaco. She was a key Russiagator. She's the number 2 in the Justice Department. And then, of course, we have Jake Sullivan, key Russiagators. He's the National Security Advisor. Harris will also be surrounded by Russiagators.
Yep.
Yeah.
So if the Kremlin chimes in one way or another, it doesn't really make any difference because it's now part of the DNA of elite politics right now. Meaning, if something goes wrong, you always have a good fall guy. Okay,
right.
Or you have useful idiots, which is one of their favorites to play right now. So, and moving forward, so no surprise there. You just have to wonder if somebody like Kamala Harris can even master the very fundamental, the basic fundamentals of how Russiagate works. But we'll leave that for the next
right. No, that's right. But here, our good friend Cynthia has asked a very interesting question. Very, very interesting question. She says, why is Putin so confident that Mongolia, because Putin is making a visit today to Mongolia. So he's saying, why is Putin so confident that Mongolia won't carry out orders from the ICC to have him arrested upon arriving on their soil? Don't you think that Putin would have learned by now not to trust any country to keep their word? Think of the US and Germany, to name a few. And does the ICC have legal powers to find Mongolia or even charge them some other kind of some other kind of crime on orders for ignoring their orders to have him arrested? Well, in practical terms, the ICC can't really do anything. I mean, all they can do is simply condemn Mongolia for failing to arrest him. But the general question, I mean, that's a very interesting. Why is Putin so confident that Mongolia won't enforce the ICC arrest warrant, even though Mongolia is a party to the Rome Statute? What do you think, Peter?
Well, I mean, I think the long and the short of it is that most of the world doesn't really care what the ICC does.
Right, but Mongolia is a party to the Rome Statute, though.
Yeah, well, I again, I think that they don't take it all that seriously. This is a post-colonial idea of prosecuting people on the periphery. So I mean, yeah, I get the point. I don't think anybody in the Kremlin was thinking twice. Maybe we shouldn't do that trip. I don't see what kind of international pressure it could be really applied to Mongolia. And George is absolutely right. I mean, okay, well, Mongolia will be condemned by the ICC, and so.
Well, yeah, but I mean, all right. Let's think about South Africa. Remember, the issue came up when the BRICS meeting in South Africa, and South Africa basically didn't give the pledge, which is what the Russians were looking for, a pledge that they won't arrest Putin. And while it was unlikely that they would do it, there wasn't the pledge. There was a dispute between the Supreme Court of South Africa and the president over whether to enforce the arrest warrant. And Russia basically decided not to take their chances in South Africa. So the question then is, with Mongolia, I have to assume that some kind of a back channel exists between Mongolia and Russia, in which basically fundamental pledges were made and said no, under no circumstances will this happen, in the way that South Africa basically couldn't give those pledges.
Well, Mongolia isn't really at the center of the geopolitical equation right now. Okay, the Western powers' leverage over Mongolia is tenuous at best. Okay, so and then on top of that, this is a big deal for Mongolia to have the Russian president visit. I mean, why spoil the party here? So, I mean, I saw those news reports too. I mean, I just don't think Mongolia really gives a hoot one way or another. They have another agenda in play right now. And if you look at the ICC is just a complete mess right now. Okay, I mean, it called for the arrest warrants of two figures in Israel. Nothing much has come of it. We'll see. They all hot and heavy about condemning Russia. But those investigations are kind of drying up too, because everyone has realized that it's all the Ukrainian government sources. So it's like, well, we'll keep looking, we'll keep digging. I mean, the ICC has just acquitted itself so badly in its entire history that it's very much a spent force. When the Intercom came out with his request for arrest warrants, everybody, oh my goodness, they're finally getting their act together. Well, maybe it's all turning into a fizzle. I mean, they've completely embarrassed themselves. I'm the last person to talk about it. George probably is one of the preeminent experts on the court in the world, and I say that without hyperbole. Okay, so it's this is a lot of words about stuff that really aren't important.
No, I think so. I don't really understand though why Mongolia did become a party. Why did it join?
It just wanted to join all the clubs that everybody else was in. I think it's just as simple as that. Okay, right. And on top of that, I mean, like, who's the ICC? Okay, I mean, All right, it's a dinner club. Okay, we'll join that one too. Okay, well, I'm sure they're part of some kind of international postal agreement too. Okay, so much to do about nothing. I mean, the ICC just acquitted itself so badly in the former Yugoslavia is the best and primary example, in my opinion. Is that it just it showed itself for what it was. It's a sham. Okay, so. I don't think. Do you think there are heavy membership fees to be part of that?
No, there isn't. But there's still. I mean, when Armenia, I think Armenia is now joining the ICC. That's quite a big deal. And
but
Russia
that's for a different
seriously
purpose.
Because it essentially means no more visits to Armenia, because that's something Armenia will enforce that arrest warrant.
Yeah, but George, that's the whole point here. Okay, Mongolia didn't join to the ICC to be part of an anti-Russia coalition. Right. Armenia explicitly wants to become part of the convention to be a wedge against Russia. These are two different things. Okay, and it's an abuse of the ICC in its spirit and its mission in the world. So I mean, again, the ICC is disgraced.
No, I think so. But I think in the case of I mean, it's very important, and we talked about it when South Africa was discussing this, whether to enforce the arrest warrant or not. And we said that it's basically, for all the talk that you are obligated to arrest someone is not really true. It's a very dubious reading of the.
It's kind of it's like a little. It's a pinky promise. Okay.
Right. I mean, it's there, but basically you can't really force states to arrest a head of state simply because if you do, that could jeopardize them. They could basically be suddenly facing war. I mean, it's like if you arrest, a Russian president, you could be, in jeopardy of getting your country bombed. So you can't really demand, or you have to arrest him.
Explain what you mean. What you're saying is, let's say, for example, the Russian president visits South Africa, and then the South Africans refuse to enforce the warrant, the arrest warrant, the order from the ICC, and then you have a special forces unit from wherever American land in Peoria or Cape Town or wherever it's going to be, and that's an act of war against that country.
Right. Okay? No, so I think
it's very messy.
That's it. But I think what they were suggesting in the Rome Statute is that if you do, let's say South Africa were to arrest Putin, now at that moment, South Africa would be in very serious danger of getting attacked by Russia. I mean, you can't just go around seizing one state's president and not expect that state to respond with extreme force. So that's why the Rome Statute kind of hems and haws on this very issue, because we can't really expect the parties to the statute to get themselves into this into a situation where they're in jeopardy. And now normally they say, hey, well, this is very easy because you've got a weak state. Let's say you got a weak, like Sudan. I think South Africa did arrest the guy who was issued with an arrest warrant to Sudan. I've forgotten his name. Omar, I think Omar, that president of Sudan. I think South Africa did arrest him, but there's not a lot that Sudan can do about it. Can do about South Africa. So they said, okay, well, now we arrest him, but you can't go and arrest South Africa. Can't just arrest the president of Russia and not expect an extremely vigorous response from Russia. And I think that applies to Mongolia, just to go back to the question, which is that, if Mongolia were to try something like this, the consequences would be very serious for Mongolia.
Well, the only reason why this story was brought up is just another to show that Putin is isolated on the world stage, which of course he's not. Okay. And if they have only if the Mongolians were I mean, this is just a Western imagination churning along. I seriously found officials in Mongolia were saying, should we enforce it? Or I don't think that even came up. It's just ridiculous. Okay, this is just again with Russiagate, just a phobia of how do we hem Russia in? How do we isolate it? And if only Mongolia would do its job. I mean, okay, fine. That's a wonderful little story that is completely detached from reality.
Yeah. Well, that's it.
Omar Bashir. Thank you very much. Yeah, right.
Omar Bashir, exactly. That was he was the Sudan leader. Yeah, no, I think so, and I think, and that's why it was always a little unlikely that tiny Mongolia is going to get itself into this.
Well, it's not so tiny,
jeopardy with Russia, because if it did, it's not as if anyone's going to come to Mongolia's assistance. I mean, so that's why it was.
And it's not so tiny. It's a pretty big country, actually, and it's very rich with minerals and whatnot. So it's a country that is coveted. I mean, and it's one of those interesting things how the Russians and the Chinese have kind of decided we will not have intense competition. We'll have intense cooperation, and Mongolia is right in the middle there. It's always been the fate of Mongolia.
Right. Well, but its population is not really that huge.
Yeah, it's very small. Yeah.
Exactly. That's what I mean. It's just populations. I mean, it's like, so any conflict between Russia and Mongolia is not going to go well.
And it won't go for long.
Yes, that's right. So, see if we can show this. Oh, I think maybe I can show this. So we were talking yesterday about the German elections, and then we know. Can you see this, Peter?
Yep.
Good. All right. So,
I just can't tell how many slides there are. That's all.
Oh, you can't. Okay. Well, that's not that many. So we had the results were pretty much as expected.
George, can I make a suggestion?
Yes.
On the top of my screen, it has a number of options here. Is it possible you could move our boxes to the top so we could see the entire text? I don't want to screw it up for you here, but I know that you can put it on the margin or on top.
Let's see.
Okay, now you lost your presentation.
Yeah. No, I'll go back and see if I can do it.
Okay. All right. Or maybe I've led you astray. All right, let's go back to your presentation.
Let's try this. This is all right. It doesn't make it's the same thing, right?
Okay, let's continue. Go ahead.
All right. Anyway, let's go back to what we just looked at. So what happened was that we had the election, and in these two German states, Thuringia in English and Saxony also in English, and the Alternative for Deutschland won very substantially in Thuringia, and the Christian Democrats barely won, just by 1 percentage point.
Basically, a dead heat.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, and obviously there is anguish, but the anguish on the part of the German leaders is tempered by their knowledge, which is, hey, well, we're still going to keep the Alternative for Deutschland out of power. Doesn't matter how many votes they get. We're just going to keep them out of power. So they said, and so the Christian Democrats, who didn't do particularly well, not as disastrous, obviously, as the traffic light coalition. The media said, well, the Christian Democrats are the big winners of the night. Well, in a sense, they are the big winners of the night because they will get to form coalition governments, a kind of a coalition of anybody but the AfD, and so they'll say, okay, well, we have won. So it's a kind of the peculiar. It's a little like in a different way, the UK election, where you get this landslide by by Keir Starmer. Oh, he's the big winner, even though the results were absolutely dreadful for Labour, completely falling short of any serious expectation. But through the peculiarities of the election system, and in Germany through the peculiarities of this German attempt to exclude parties that are against the establishment, then you can say, yeah, we won. It's a good result for us, even though it's a terrible result. But anyway, Scholz came out today expressing his deep concern about the election results. And it says here, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz on Monday urged parties to avoid collaborating with the far right after the AfD made record gains in 2 regional polls, and his own coalition suffered a heavy defeat a year before a general election. In the former East German state of Thuringia, the anti-immigrant, anti-Islam AfD became the first far-right party to win a regional election since the Second World War, taking about 33% of the vote on Sunday.
What is this publication, George?
This I'm reading is from The Guardian.
Okay. Well, I mean, again,
yeah.
let's look at the description of the party here. It's anti-immigrant, anti-Islam. Well, that may be true, but it's more than anything else. It's against the policies of the current government and the traffic light coalition. I mean, that's what's at stake here. They didn't vote on anti-immigration. They didn't vote on anti-Islam. They voted on the government in power and its policies. Let's be honest here. This is such a sham. Okay, this is a smear campaign. No, I mean, why did Sergeant Schultz's party do so badly? Why? They're not telling us. At least not here.
Right. No, but that's right. And then they say the AfD was headed for a close second place in neighboring Saxony. It was very close. It was 1 point. And then Bild newspaper described the outcome as a political earthquake. And then Scholz, whose deeply unpopular 3-party coalition received a slapdown in both states, called the results, quote, bitter and, quote, worrying. The AfD is damaging Germany, he said. It's weakening the economy, dividing society, and ruining our country's reputation. And you thought
that's what the traffic light coalition has done.
Exactly. I when I read that, I thought, oh, he's talking about himself now. Weakening the economy, dividing society, and ruining.
AfD is not in the government. It has had no impact on economic policy of Germany. Zero.
Zero. Absolutely.
Okay. So how can it be damaging Germany, weakening Germany's economy?
That's right. Exactly right. And then he goes on, all democratic parties are now called upon to form stable governments without right-wing extremists. And that's it. So everybody got to you have to form a stable. How do you form a stable government if you're determined to keep out a party that's just won 33% of the vote? But so it says coalition governments are the norm in Germany at federal and state level, and mainstream parties have always ruled out collaboration with the far right. But AfD co-leader Alice Weidel said she believes the undemocratic firewall was untenable given the party's electoral success, while fellow leader Tino Krupula, that's how you pronounce it, said there would be no politics without the AfD. And anyway, so this is the results. So if you look at this as Saxony, and you can see that the CDU, this was their big win, 31.9%. The AfD, 30.6%. And then you've got in third place the Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht. That's 11.8%.
Let's just call it Sarah's party. Okay.
Exactly. And then we got the Social Democrats. Social Democrats, they got 7.3%. Scholz was happy about that because they managed to get over the 5% threshold. The most pessimistic forecast said the Social Democrats wouldn't get to 5%, and even the Greens managed to get to 5.1%. but not the Free Democrats. The Free Democrats are the permanent feature of every single post-war German government. It always has the Free Democrats, and yet they always do disastrously in these elections. 1.5% is what they got, but they're in the government.
Now the Greens, damn it, they made it not.
Yeah, but they didn't in the other one. Just in this one, they barely got this 5.1%. So they're not going to get too many seats. And this is how many seats they're going to get in Saxony. So the CDU is going to get 41 seats, the AfD 40 seats, the Sarah's party 15, Social Democrats will get 10, the Grüne, the Greens will get 7, the Linke, the left 6, and there's whatever. So, if you start adding this up, so basically you got the Social Democrats and the Greens. Between them, they're the two parties of the coalition. Between them, they get 17 seats. So the AfD gets 40 seats. The 17 that barely gets more than Sarah's party. But much less than either the Christian Democrats or the AfD. So that's Saxony, and then here we have the Thuringia, and here we got the AfD. They get 32 seats, and the CDU gets 23 seats. The BSW, the Sarah's party, they get 15. Then you got the Linke 12, it's the left part. The Social Democrats got 6, and the Greens got 0. Couldn't make it. They didn't make it. Greens 0, the Free Democrats 0. So that's of the governing coalition in Thuringia. The Social Democrats get 6 seats. That's it. That's the total number that the government gets, 6 seats.
Well, you know what? An important thing here. I mean, obviously, looking at the results is important, but George and I have been chronicling what's been going on in German politics, and that's something we don't usually do because German politics, almost by definition, since the Second World War, has been boring. I mean, really, really boring, which is good because it creates a sense of stability. But these election results are just part of a trend, and that's something that really has to be looked upon here. AfD is a relatively new party. Sarah's new party is like, it came into existence like 15 minutes ago, everyone, and look what its results are. I mean, these are the things you need to look at here. Obviously, there was an election disaster for the ruling coalition in the cards. Everybody knew that. But what's really important is that, they say they won't deal with these parties here. Well, they're dismissing the democratic will, okay? And it's something that George and I have talked about at great length, is that either you believe in the democratic process or you don't. Okay, right. So you're going to dismiss, and this is something we're seeing all over the Western world. We won't deal with these people, the people's deputies. We won't deal with them. This is part of a trend, and it shows just how weak and afraid this ruling ideology of the West is. But they have the resources, the tools to suppress people that disagree. This is the story of the German elections.
Right, now that's right, and this is also very, very interesting because when you look at these numbers, and then you say, okay, well, the CDU will form a government, will keep out the AfD. The CDU cannot form a government without going to Sarah Wagenknecht and say, well, will you join us in our coalition? Because they just don't have the number. The numbers are just not there because they don't have enough. But she has made clear that the condition is that you have to support our foreign policy. Now, admittedly, this is in the provinces, and so they don't deal with foreign policy. But this has an impact on the rest of the country because they're going to say, yeah, but we will only join you in the coalition if you come out and make clear that you want to pursue peace in Ukraine. That's very difficult for the Christian Democrats because the Christian Democrats have been even more hawkish than Sergeant Schultz. because Sergeant Schultz at least says, I don't want to send the Taurus missiles. The Christian Democrat says, yes, send them already. Just back them up and just send them to Ukraine. So that's the price. So it's going to be very hard to see how the Christian Democrats can form any kind of a coalition with Sarah, unless she just simply turns out to be a complete opportunist and says, "Oh, forget it. Forget everything that I've just said before." I don't think she is an opportunist.
I don't either.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, fine. You run the sandbox, okay? The traffic light coalition, fine. We'll play by your rules. You rule as a minority. Good luck with that, okay?
Right.
Fine.
Yeah.
The political illogic and immaturity of that is obvious. It's like, well, the people are apparently not very happy with your rule. You don't want any input, so keep going.
Right.
We'll wait.
That's right. That's right.
That is the smart move here. That's
yep.
I mean, the problem is always the allure of power. Get a position. Now I have power. I can make decisions. I can make things happen. That's very, very seductive. But I don't think Sarah is in that line of business.
No, I don't think so. And I think
AFD, I don't think is in.
I don't. And I think because Sarah has just started out, I mean, she just formed the party. She's not going to do her cause any good if she were now to betray her principles. So she really has to stick to her guns, and which is her stance says, I will not join any coalition government unless they make a commitment to pursue immediate peace in Ukraine. So she's going to have to do it. Because if she now were to go and say, yeah, I said that during the election just to get votes, but now that the allure of power is very close, I'm going to forget all the things that I said. That's political suicide. I don't think she's going to do that. She's been around.
I mean, this is just one state in Germany that we're talking about here.
Two states. The same thing is true in Saxony.
I was looking at this specific result in front of it, but winning or doing well in two states can be a harbinger of what you can do in the rest of what was the DDR, and the AFD's appeal is growing in the West. So if I was Sarah and AFD, I would just sit pretty and wait for it to develop, because this current government is the most catastrophic government Germany has had since the Second World War. I mean, they have no comparison. Okay.
Right? Yeah, I agree. And she doesn't really have to wait that long, because the federal elections take place in exactly a year's time. Yeah, exactly. So she doesn't have to make any kind of decisions. You can just dawdle for a year, take part in these meaningless coalition government talks, and then we're on to the campaign for next year's federal elections, because that's what she's looking for. She's,
and George,
federal elections.
In 1 year from now, what is the Germans' deindustrialization look like?
Right.
Who knows what's going to happen with Ukraine? And also everybody throw into the mix. It's just been reported today is that the European Union, is importing more Russian energy right now. I mean, like, what policy is what are you people all about? All you keep doing is impoverishing us. Okay. Yeah. So if I were Sarah, AFD, I would just sit pretty on the sideline and say, we told you so. Right. They don't want to.
Yeah, okay. Exactly. And because in effect, I mean, when it's, the election is a year's time, the campaign is pretty much starting now. So you don't have to make any decisions in a hurry.
And there is no indication whatsoever coming out of this coalition government that they're going to change course, particularly on Ukraine.
Right.
Do you think the waning days of the Biden administration is going to allow Sergeant Schultz any wiggle room? No. And on top of it, and this is a side story, is that the U.S. administrations hate people like Schultz. Okay, they want to see him done. Do you think people in Washington are happy with the election result in Germany? You bet they are. You think, liberal democracy is under threat in Germany. No, it looks like we can get rid of Schultz finally. Okay.
Right. Yeah. And then here we have the percentages in Thuringia, and you can see the huge victory for the AFD. I mean, it's almost 10 points, the spread from the AFD and the CDU. And then Sarah, she's 15.8%. And then we've got the Linke, the left, that's 13.1. And then, you know, Sergeant Schultz barely sort of gets above the 5% threshold. Greens happily 3.2%. That's why I get 0 representation. So that's very nice. So here is the New York Times coverage today. But I love the headline: East Germans lean towards extremes in state elections. Now, when you see East Germans, you know, right away you're thinking about the Cold War. I mean, it's not like, you know, you could have said Eastern states or Germans in the East or something. But when you say East Germans, you're starting to think, oh God, it's those people. There's with Walter Ulbricht, the ones who were doing the goose step, you know, all the way up to the 1980s, the one who were winning all those gold medals in the Olympics. I mean, that's they clearly wanted to create that very impression in your mind when they say East Germans lean towards extremes in state elections. And then here we have the Alternative for Germany party was on course to win in Thuringia in what was seen as a worrying sign of the health of German democracy. Who decides what is the health of German democracy and what is a worrying sign of the health of it? You know, they just make these as if we the New York Times, we the establishment can establish what's healthy and what's unhealthy.
Well, and of course, I mean, also built into this is you know, German history in the 20th century in its entirety. Okay, I mean, how often do you talk? What's the health of the Dutch democracy? What's the health of the Slovenian democracy? Nobody uses that. They only use it for one country.
No. It's definitely, it's definitely is that in order to get everybody very anxious.
That's right. Yeah, it's a trigger.
Yeah, that's right. And then here we have the returns were seen as a worrying indicator of the health and future of German democracy, and they were likely to intensify a quandary over whether and how mainstream parties can isolate extremists and keep them from entering government. Again, notice how the Times immediately enters into these blithe assumptions that this is, of course, highly desirable that mainstream parties should unite and isolate extremists and keep them from entering government. It's like journalists automatically are thinking the way that the ruling elites are thinking. Yes, of course, we must isolate the extremists and keep them from entering the government.
Yeah, well, you know, from the jump ball, they're extremists. They don't explain why. Okay, right. And again, you know, at the very top of this article, there's no indication that people are dissatisfied with the status quo. They never address that issue. Okay, and this is what makes an article like this just propaganda. Okay, because it's not contextualized whatsoever.
Right.
Okay? And George is right. I don't know how much it works. You know, I mean, it works for you and I because we remember the DDR. Okay, I mean, I literally visited the DDR many times. Okay, but you know, I'm not sure. You know, this is just kind of a Cold War clue that they're throwing out here. I mean, the DDR wasn't actually a bad place to live, ladies and gentlemen.
No, I know, but you know, for the Americans, if you start bringing up East Germany, that kind of, you know, it sort of makes them very, very nervous. Because it's first of all, it's Germany. Germany automatically makes you a little nervous, but it's also communist. It was part of the communist bloc. So you say East Germany, and then they suddenly remember, hey, those are the guys who won more medals than we did in the Olympic Games. This tiny country won more medals than we did. Then so it's just we don't want to mess with them.
Yeah, but it's also kind of like mixing metaphors. I mean, East Germany and the articles about a alleged right-wing extremist. East Germany.
No, that's right.
What's going on here?
Right. But it's a very strange way of putting it. East Germans. I mean, do you ever say East Frenchmen or
Yeah.
East Englishmen. I mean, it's like East Germans right away. You know, it's there to trigger a reaction from readers. All parties have said they would shun the alternative for Germany, which they consider as dangerous to democracy. That could leave the Christian Democratic Union, which may end up running both state governments, as the main beneficiary of the vote among traditional mainstream parties. Isn't that nice? You know, nobody particularly wants you, but you're the main beneficiary. Um, and then, even as the AfD attracted a significant number of votes, its regional branches in Saxony and Thuringia have been classified by regional domestic intelligence agencies as confirmed extremist groups based on ethnically tinged anti-migrant positions, Islamophobia, and defamation of state institutions and government officials. And so you know you can't go around defaming state institutions and government officials. On
Yeah,
a
but I
na-
mean, but
Mhm.
what makes it, this really odd here? Okay, so classified by regional domestic intelligence agencies as quote unquote confirmed extremists. Well, so Germany
Good.
allows confirmed extremists to be involved in elections?
Well,
I
no, but
mean,
that's right. But what it says, and I think it's in the next slide, is that once you say this party is extremist, that means that the intelligence services are within their rights to conduct surveillance of you. They're within their rights to spy on you. I think it's in the next slide. Um, it says, yes, these designations allow intelligence surveillance of the party. So you design this. And now, having said that, so the intelligence service, they make this assessment. And once they've made the assessment, they can go ahead and start surveillance of the party. And then it says, and have led to mounting calls for a ban.
oh, I get it. So you allow the election, you allow people to vote their preference, and then when their preference is known, you can go ban it. You can void
Yes,
it, delete it,
that's right.
right?
You ban it. That's
Oh,
right.
okay. Okay.
That's right. But they did not stop voters in Thuringia and Saxony from voting for the party in droves. Apparently, that was the idea, is to stop them from voting. We said, hey, you're an extremist, and we will conduct surveillance of you. We might even ban you. But that didn't serve the purpose, which is they still went ahead and voted. You're not supposed to vote. We warned you what happens if you vote in this way. Many fear that a ban or even a coalition that keeps the AfD from power will only add to the sense of disenfranchisement among the party's backers and increase its support. So this is
You think? You
yeah,
think?
that's right. Pounce. They will pounce on
I
this.
wonder what Ivy League school this writer went to. Okay.
Yeah, and then it says both Mr. Schultz and the Christian Democrats have recently taken a harsher stance toward illegal immigration and urged a toughening of asylum laws and the faster deportation of those who do not qualify for asylum. And then major issues for both the AfD.
Well, that is again very disingenuous by the moron that wrote this article. I mean, have recently taken a harsher stance. Yeah,
Right.
15 minutes before the election. Okay,
That's right.
I mean,
But
but this is so
exactly. Yeah.
disingenuous, dishonest.
No,
Okay.
that's right. But notice also the use of the word harsh. Harsh. To say that it's already, when you say something is harsh, means it's something unfair, immoral, right? They didn't say, these are very carefully crafted. They didn't say have taken a harder stance. They said a harsher. They were being harsh in urging a toughening of asylum laws. And as we discussed yesterday, basically, hey, well, actually enforcing laws against people living in Germany illegally. I mean, imagine doing something about people just living in Germany illegally.
Well, I guess the harsher stances, and I'll keep it as short as possible. George and I were discussing this yesterday, where you have illegal migrants that have some kind of asylum status who are getting social welfare payments, and they're allowed to go back to the country they're fleeing from, going to
That's right.
Germany for political, but they're going back for a vacation. Okay,
Exactly.
and then they're still asylum seekers for political.
That's right. Exactly. And that's right. Still collecting their welfare checks. That shift was accelerated by a knife attack in the western city of Solingen, when prosecutors say a Syrian refugee killed 3 bystanders at a festival of diversity. And then he says, both the AFD and the BSW immediately leaped on the killings to use as part of their campaigns. Now, notice all, everything that's missing in this description. I mean, because we talked about this yesterday, which is, well, this was a person who had already been denied asylum. He was supposed to have been deported, but apparently decided not to wait around for the deportation officers to show up and take him out of the country. So, in other words, to say he was a refugee, well, the courts had decided that he wasn't a refugee. They said he needs to be deported. And then they say, oh, they leaped on the killings as part of their campaign. Well, 3 innocent people were murdered. That's kind of big deal in this a festival of diversity. Here, that they, and even the way they put it, like bystanders. What does that mean, bystanders? They were just 3 innocent people who were murdered by this this person who should not have been in the country to begin with. But they leaped on the killings. And
he shouldn't have been at the festival. He shouldn't have been at the festival of diversity. Okay, according to the law. George, the Democrats didn't jump on the George Floyd.
No, they absolutely did not. No, that didn't at all. Anyway, so that's the Times coverage.
Well, I mean, let's pick up the story from here. AFD could easily still be banned. This is in the works, everyone. Yeah. I've been talking about this for a long time. Okay,
that's right.
I mean,
that's right.
When you have Germany's intelligence services are looking into and they're given permission to surveil and all, this is building. It's softening you up. Well, after all this, they're going to be banned. Okay, so they want to disenfranchise up to 30% of one state in Germany. That things don't end well when you start doing that kind of thing.
Right.
And particularly with which I'll do later on my program this week, the global assault on free speech, and that's very much alive in Germany too.
Yes. No. Yeah. No. That's exactly right. I mean, and that's going to be very much the banning is definitely on the agenda because you've done all this. You've threatened. You've tried to keep them out of power, and if people go on stubbornly voting for the AFD, then you ultimately bring out the big guns and you say, well, you ban them. And the great thing about banning is that it's not as though the mainstream media are going to make up any kind of kick up a fuss about it. On the contrary, they'll be cheering this on.
Right.
So you don't have to worry too much about it. Well, what are the repercussions? Well, actually, the kind of Germany's kind of consensus will say, yeah, well, what else can you do? I mean, these people are just extremists, and if you just ban them.
Well, what will be really interesting is that they'll say, well, no, it was legally done, and there was a consensus and all that, but Germany won't enforce its own immigration laws. Okay, right. It's very selective on what things that they will enforce.
Oh yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, that's right. They won't enforce their own. Yeah. Anyway, so here we have, we have, was it DJ 53144 says, the unspoken truth out loud, the UN, ICC, ICJ, OPCW, AEIA are attack dogs on the Western leash. Yeah,
well, I think it's a little nuanced because some of these institutions that did work well have been corrupted. Okay, I mean, I'm sorry. I think I can speak for George. The ICC it's just on the black side of my ledger. I just people have acquitted themselves so badly. The OPCW, that was corrupted. That was corrupted by the Western powers over the alleged use of chemical weapons in Syria. That was a good institution. It's been destroyed.
Well, it was destroyed some time ago. It was destroyed also even before the invasion of Iraq.
Well, let's put it this way. Take a look at some of the good work that Aaron Mate has done about it. I think it's very exhaustive. He was attacked savagely for his reporting on it. So for a fuller picture, look there. But in the spirit of the comment, I would agree with, as with George. Yes.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the thing was when you talk about the UN it's an interesting case because you've got basically the UN Security Council, and you have the permanent members of the Security Council. But what you really have is that the Western powers always maintain a very united bloc. And therefore, they often prevail also that they're able to coerce other member states. And so they tend to get they get the votes. They usually win most of the votes. What they can't do is to get their own way, to get the UN to do what they wanted to do, which is because the Security Council has built in within it is the veto power of the permanent members. That's what holds them up. But other than that, they can usually get their own way because they're absolutely united. They vote exactly in the way that the orders has come down.
Yeah, well, I mean, but they use UN Security Councils when they get their way. It's great. If they don't get their way, they're just going to do what they're going to do anyway. So look at Iraq for example. Okay. Or the destruction of the former Yugoslavia. That had nothing to do with the Security Council. That was the initiative.
Yeah, but again, they get their way most of the time because even when essentially as the Security Council, they can't essentially because of the veto. I mean, the key is here the veto. The veto is what prevents them from getting their way on the Security Council. But after that, they defy the veto. Then just everything goes back to normal. I mean, what difference did it make the fact that the UN Security Council, that the Americans and the British knew that there's no way that the UN Security Council was going to support them? They just went ahead, invaded Iraq, and then everyone just had forgotten about everything that took place at the Security Council. The UN continued to support the U.S. mission in Iraq. There was basically they were getting money for the UN mission, and then that moment when there was the resistance within the UN Security Council was just long forgotten. I mean, and the UN is again busily working in Iraq. Same with Libya. UN continued sort of working with the Western powers. So really, other than that veto, basically, the Western powers can just do whatever the hell.
Well, I mean, this is you hear this argument all the time, is that the UN is dysfunctional because of the veto. I would say the UN is functional because of it, not dysfunctional. It's working exactly the way it was designed. Okay, as frustrating as that may sound. Okay, I mean, remember I guess it was like 9 months ago, George, you have these voices that Russia should be thrown off of the Security Council and thrown out of the UN. Okay, right. Which is that's what they want because then there's it's a barrier to get having them have the UN give them a seal of approval for what they want to do. But my argument has long been is over the last 30 years. They've been using NATO as their new UN. So you'll have the Western powers using NATO as a substitute for the United Nations. And they'll say that NATO has standing. It has no standing. It has no standing whatsoever.
No, it has no standing. But the problem, again, with the UN is that even when the Western powers don't get their way, and because of the veto, they don't get their way, that moment when they fail to get their own way is quickly forgotten. Because everyone just then moves on and say, well, yeah, but the UN has got to go on, doing important work in Iraq. Same with in Yugoslavia, they didn't get their way on Yugoslavia. They couldn't get UN Security Council authorization to bomb Yugoslavia. But in no time at all, the UN Security Council authorized the presence of a force, KFOR, in Kosovo. So the problem is that as long as you have this, and the Western powers are so united in what they do, it doesn't really matter too much. However, the little resistance that they encounter, they can basically just overcome it, and everyone just sort of forgot about it, and we just continue as before. So that and that's why, I mean, it's the same with, like, they created this the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, even though it was obviously working in ways that was entirely in the interests of the Western powers and against the interests of the Serbs. The UN Security Council continued to fund it. It just continued to go on supporting it. So it's like a sort of almost like a kind of a zombie-like institution that just goes on and on and on. Anyway, so 60 Cents says, greetings. Oh, this is our good friend from Silicon Valley. Greetings, George and Peter. It's about 7:30 a.m. here in Silicon Valley. The current state of world affairs, such as the clampdown on free speech, protests being crushed against genocide and governments, and political violence, such as Trump's assassination attempt, remind me of an old English TV comedy show whose name I do not recall, used to present a skit when they would literally run out of scripts and they would collectively approach the camera repeating, "What are we going to do now?" Yeah, I don't know this comedy skit, but I like the sound of it. So.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of stuff is ad hoc, to be honest with you. Okay, I mean, if you look at particularly American foreign policy since the end of the Cold War, where the successes. I mean, it's just one blunder after another, blunder after another.
Right. Yeah. Except because it's so powerful, they can just go on. There is something to be said, like the empire of chaos. You said, okay, well, we've got chaos. We haven't actually solved any problems. We've made problems for everybody else, so everybody else can just go on living with the consequences of our own actions. And then that's what they've done in the Middle East. Okay, well, we did this. Well, you're the one you're going to have to go on living with the consequences. So the other thing which we haven't talked about is this, the news about the death of the hostages, the 6 hostages, and this extreme emotional response that it's engendered in the United States. So it's quite amazing that when it comes to something like an American life or an Israeli life, then there's this emotional response, stunningly absent in the case of the loss of lives of non-Americans and non-Israelis.
Yeah, it's really quite amazing, and what's even more amazing and pathetic is that Joe Biden can go along with the machinations of the Zionist clique in Israel, and he calls himself a Zionist, an Irish or Zion, whatever he said.
Whatever it is, I can't remember.
Yeah, whatever that means too. But they don't even have the wherewithal to protect their own citizens. I mean, look at the hostage. See, George and I remember the Iranian hostage crisis. Okay, that was a visceral thing in my youth. I remember it very, very clearly, and it's something that really seared into the consciousness of a lot of Americans because of mainstream media, that specific narrative. But American hostages are being held in Gaza, and what has the U.S. government done for them? Nothing.
Right.
Absolutely nothing. As a matter of fact, put their lives in peril by continuing to arm Israel. I mean, it's really remarkable. Never in my lifetime when American life have they ever really, George, remember tie a ribbon around the old oak tree, and I mean, you would. I remember when I was really young, American POWs or missing in action, they had these copper bracelets, and they would have the soldier's name and the serial number, and people would wear them. Save our, release our POWs. Get our boys back. And people knew their name, that you were carrying it.
Right.
What are the names of the American hostages in Gaza?
Right. Yeah.
It's amazing. I mean, the U.S. administration will not even step out of line, out of worrying about offending Israel, to protect its own people. It's extraordinary.
Yeah. But well, that said, I mean, and the thing was that, of course, that Israel has been spinning this out, and the administration has been spinning this out. The peace talks, the ceasefire talks, which has been going on and on and on, week after week after week, and the media again play along with it. Oh, we're really close to this the peace talk. But of course, they haven't come to anything. And now again, we're talking around Biden. Biden is going to lay the law down and say that's it. It's a take it or leave it thing. Because they're not going to take it or leave it.
What was it that Saturday nights you're talking to my hand, you're not talking to me? Okay, it's just ridiculous. Okay.
Yeah. That's right, and that's right. But in doing this. In doing this now, there's when you have the situation, they say, well, they're now dead. They immediately say, oh well, Hamas and this is terrible. But the fact was that a deal was possible weeks and weeks ago. These hostages could have been saved weeks and weeks ago. And what's just extraordinary is precisely that there isn't the assignment of responsibility to the Biden administration. That it was you had this deal that within your grasp. You didn't do it. You allowed this nonsense to continue.
Yeah, but George, there was,
and you could have got this deal.
But in November there was a deal. Hostages were released,
right,
on both sides. It's not like it's never happened before. It's happened in this conflict. Yeah. Okay, it's doable if there's the political will to do it. I mean, that's what is even more extraordinary, is that, a deal was made, it happened. Why can't it happen again? Okay. And and Blinken, the Undertaker, as I refer to him as, I mean, this guy's a pathological liar. Right. I mean, he stands on some tarmac. I don't know if it's in Jordan or in Egypt. He's just standing there on the tarmac. Oh, we're feet away. We're the touchdown line. And you always uses a sports metaphor, by the way. And these are people's lives, you fool. Okay, right. You degenerate fool. You're talking about people's lives. Why are you talking about sports metaphors? Okay?
Yes.
And he has no interest. He has no interest even in American hostages coming home.
No, that's right. And incidentally, the I forgot his name. The young American who was killed. He served in the Israeli armed forces, which itself is a very interesting case, which nobody really examines. It's actually against the law. I mean, it's against the law for an American citizen to be serving in the armed forces of another state. You can't do that. Yes. Go and serve there. I mean, so itself is sort of, strange. All the weeping and wailing about his death. But of course, it is sad that the young man is dead. But nonetheless, he was serving in the Israeli armed forces. I mean, what was he doing serving in the Israeli armed forces? And again, the Israeli armed forces are not exactly, known for their humanity. But what I think is so interesting, there was Harris, droning on in that interview last week. We got to get a deal done. How many times did she say we've got to get a deal done? We've got to get a deal done. She didn't mean anything by it. Like if you have a deal done, you see, if you're going to release the hostages, there's going to have to be a quid pro quo. Israel will have to release prisoners. That has to be a mutual release of prisoners. But they never really think in those terms. They just say, well, we've got to get a deal done. We got to get our own way. And then, of course, when you insist you're just going to get our own way, and you don't recognize the rights of anyone else, well, this is what happens. And now they're dead. There was absolutely no need for these 6 people to be dead. There was a deal possible weeks and weeks ago, and so there's absolutely no reason for them now to be dead.
There's no diplomacy going on here. Well, you think about it, everyone. I watched the news coverage. The head of Mossad and the head of the CIA are meeting in Doha. Why aren't diplomats meeting in Doha?
Yeah.
I mean, this is a diplomatic issue. Okay. See, they've jettisoned and abandoned that completely. All right, and just to be fair, I mean, and it doesn't seep into Western media coverage, is that Hamas agreed to the Biden plan of May. Okay,
right.
They said, yeah, this is the starting point. We want our negotiation, and then in the same news cycle in the West, they say, only Hamas is holding it up. That's simply not true. That's simply not true. Okay,
no, well, it's not true.
Repeat it over and over again.
Yeah. It wasn't. But again, it's a very interesting first of all, the shallowness of the media coverage, in which the actual process of negotiation, the fact that the deal could have been achieved weeks ago, wasn't done, and therefore these lives could have been saved, and therefore the Biden administration basically has to carry responsibility for the fact that they are now dead.
Yes.
So that kind of is passed over. With no real investigation of that, because of course, for the media, the only thing that matters now is to get Harris over the finish line. I mean, they got to get Harris to win this election, and therefore anything at all that reflects badly on Biden and therefore the Biden-Harris administration must be suppressed.
Well, I mean, George,
no discussion whatever.
As we move forward towards Election Day, what do you bet, George, the last thing Kamala Harris says before real ballots, not the mail-in ones? Hopefully we'll avoid that nightmare. We'll see. The last thing she's going to say in the campaign is, I believe in the two-state solution, okay? Which is absolutely, only people in Washington say that.
Right,
Nobody in the world talks that way anymore.
Right.
Nobody.
She interestingly, she's never actually used that expression. Remember, she talks about.
She did in her fake interview. She used two-state.
She did. I don't think she said two-state solution. What she said was the right of self-determination of the Palestinians. I think she used that term. Right. Yeah, I don't
remember that specifically. Yes.
Yeah, because we talked about that. That was, she had a particular
taking a step back. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, the right of self-determination, which could mean almost anything. I mean, it doesn't really, like at least.
Like self-determination on the moon. Okay.
Yeah, no, that's right. But again, what is interesting, because the media now, the plan is this. So this is today's September 2. So we got November the 5th. So it's essentially you run out the clock. And therefore, every day, what's crucial is not to discuss anything that might reflect badly on her or on Biden. So what we've had over the past week, you've noticed there's this stupid, meaningless, ridiculous controversy about what happened at Arlington National Cemetery, where Trump visited. There's about those Gold Star families had invited Trump to go to the Arlington National Cemetery, and he posts photographs with them. They wanted those photographs, and somehow the media got it into their heads that Trump did something really terrible, and decided, well, we can now attack Trump for that. And of course, Harris then joins in. We can attack Harris for that, even though he was there at the invitation of the actual families of those who were being killed in that botched withdrawal from Afghanistan. But what is interesting is that that's a week's of meaningless controversy, just complete. So you've used up one more week on that. That's good. You don't have that many weeks left. Let's just use that up, and then so it'll be interesting. Like from we'll be here. We'll resume next week, and I wonder what meaningless controversy the media.
I can. I'm prescient. You can hold me to account. They'll spend a week on Bobby Kennedy Jr. They'll go after Tulsi Gabbard. They'll go after J.D. Vance, and they'll go back to Trump, and they'll just keep doing it. They're going to, because George and I have talked about the relative importance and influence these new influencers, who want to use that word, that Trump is surrounded with, which I think is a very good idea for his candidacy. Because I've said, and I don't want to, I speak my mind all the time. I really don't want to hear anything more from Donald Trump. I already know what Donald Trump is about. Okay, I really don't. Seriously, I just don't. Okay, I don't like the character assassination stuff. It's just so base. I don't want to hear it. Doesn't move the needle for people. But I mean, putting it back on losing against the Biden-Harris team. I mean, we're going back to Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney lost an election that was a walk in the park. Right. Okay, and this is a walk in the park too. Yep. But this campaign. The point for me is that Trump no longer is running as a populist. He won on a populist message in 2016.
Right. Yeah. No.
2020 is a voided election because it was stolen. Okay. It was rigged. Okay. Right. Now we're here. Where's the populist message? I don't hear it. Okay.
I mean, he has the only thing the populist message is immigration, and he's running with immigration, and immigration is obviously a big issue. It's a big issue. It works for the Republicans, works against the Democrats, and so that is good. But there's got to be more, and I think he has to do more than just simply talk about immigration. I mean, obviously, the issue of war and basically how you're going to end these wars, pretty much on day one. He's not talking about that, and again, he's not. He's not doing it. I mean, he's got to just keep emphasizing how he's going to focus on improving the lives of Americans. We're not.
Yeah, but see, George,
what the rest of the world is doing.
You and I have talked about this so many times, and I think you use it point blank with me, is that anti-war candidates are popular.
Yeah,
they are. Okay, in 2016. Non-interventionist message resonated with a lot of people, right. Service members, former service members, particularly in the South. It works. It works. I mean, George and I have lamented, just from a political strategist point of view, with not being partisan one way or another, but just from a strategy point of view, Trump, a mistake he's making in this campaign is not owning the lane of non-intervention. That's what he should be doing. Because he's going to attract voters. He's not going to alienate. Oh no, I want to be more intervention. I mean, those people are already with the establishment. But there are people that say, yeah, that's something that resonates with me. He should own that lane. Own it, because you're only going to attract people. You're not going to repel people with that.
Right. Lane. Yeah. No. That's exactly right. And I think he just hasn't done this precisely, to say, hey, this is what Biden and Harris have done. And we can assume Harris will continue with the Biden policy. She may not, but we can say Harris will continue with that policy. And I'm going to change it. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to fight any more of these stupid wars. Not going to endanger American security. I'm not going to push Russia and China together, because that's not good for America. And you just keep hammering this in, and then force something out of Harris. But he's just not really doing that. He's kind of resting on his laurels. He's saying, what I did in when I was president, that just doesn't work. That was already years ago. You got to,
because you have to
go me lately.
You have to go where people are now.
Yeah, exactly.
Not, it's kind of like having a fireside chat wearing a sweater. Remember in the old days in 2007? Oh, the good old days.
Exactly.
Nobody wants to hear that. Nobody wants to hear that.
No. absolutely. That's it's like, yeah, exactly like the grandpa at the dinner table. Everyone's already heard all these stories before, and I don't want to hear this story again. But unfortunately, it does he does do that, and so and of course the media, which are like, it's always very interesting. I mean, just to what extent they are just part of the apparat, the coverage, is that they're going with all the issues that they think work for the Democrats. So they're absolutely determined to make this election about abortion. They're going to go abortion, abortion, abortion. They just will not let it go, even though there's no issue here. I mean, it's like these
There's
are
no issue here.
yeah,
There is no issue here.
No, because it's like it's moved to the states. It's a state issue. And Trump has said, look, I did it. I brought these justices onto the Supreme Court. They've overturned Roe v. Wade. That's kind of what I said I would do. Now it's up to the states. It's not a federal issue anymore. But the Democrats, no, got to make a federal issue. Got to make it somehow about Trump. And that Trump is a threat to women's reproductive rights. And they're just going with this with all the time. But as you say, it just isn't an issue. It's not a federal issue anymore. Anyway, let's Governor Ventura and I endorse Harris Walz. Jesse Ventura. I mean, I don't know that much about him. You probably know more about him than I do, Peter.
I met him a couple times.
Yeah, but he seems to have fizzled out very badly. I mean, he was a kind of a populist guy. Now he's kind of a banal, I'm supporting Kamala because, I something like, I can't live with myself if I'm going to die without seeing a woman as a president, some absolutely ridiculous nonsense like that. So
well,
I don't know what the hell happened to him.
It's a boomer ailment. Okay. I mean, there's a certain percentage of white boomers that's something that they bought into and they think it's normal. Okay. And it's absurd. It's stupid. I'm way beyond that. Okay. I mean, when I was in junior high school and high school, the girls had football, they had soccer, they had everything. Okay. When I was at university, they were voted head of the class. Okay. It doesn't impact me whatsoever. The glass ceilings and all that. I don't care about it. I mean, it means nothing to me. Okay. Right. It means nothing. But when I see excellence, that's what really makes me happy.
Right, but yeah,
it's not gender driven.
Right, but the question then is nonetheless, why is Jesse Ventura doing this? I mean, he was a kind of a populist. He was supposed to be kind of an anti-establishment person. Why does he talk like the person he was? He used to mock. I mean, the whole point why people would vote for someone like Jesse Ventura is that he would challenge. He would be challenged to the establishment. But this idea, I gotta see a woman as president. Well, that's the way the establishment talks.
Yeah, but George, maybe it's a different question we mean to ask. Was he was his populism so-called a fraud, and he's just actually saying what he really thinks now?
I suspect yes. Yeah, I suspect the answer to that is yes. Yeah. I think so, and it's not unlike like Arnold Schwarzenegger, also kind of as a populist, he's an outsider.
Again, I really want to stress this kind of boomer element. Okay, this Walz guy, the vice presidential pick for Harris. I mean, tampons in men's room. Right. They just kind of bought into this. Right. You know why? Because there's no downside. There's no downside for buying into it.
Right. Okay? No, I agree with
and that's just sleazy politics. Does he really think men? I mean, as a boomer, does he really think men need tampons? No, but I mean, but agreeing with it, you get acolytes for it. No, that was an easy one. That was easy. Okay,
I'll go with it. Okay. Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that is of course true. About Walz. I think Walz has always been a fake and a phony. But Ventura, I mean, you have to then wonder whether Ventura and Schwarzenegger were originally a little bit different. That was their appeal. that somehow, well, hey, you're not a part of the establishment. You're a populist. You're a former wrestler. He's a wrestler. I mean, that's about as manly an undertaking as you can do, and yet. He sounds like like a complete dweeb. I mean, somebody you utterly despise. I don't know. I mean, it's like I think something happens to people. They just simply they fade away and just become a complete I don't know, maybe like a doormat for the establishment.
Comparing Ventura to Schwarzenegger, I think they're very different. Okay, I mean Schwarzenegger is actually a politically astute guy. Okay, I mean he was a pretty good governor. Okay, and he learned to navigate. So I mean I think for maybe both of them in the twilights of their careers, both successful. It's a way to get a little bit more of the rays, the sunlight on you again. I mean I don't know. I mean I just think it's one of these things that boomers have never understood. You should know when to go.
Right. Yeah. No.
Know when to go. Go with dignity. Leave with your health. Okay, and be with your grandchildren. I mean,
but I think that maybe but I think that maybe
George for the entire history of humanity, the greatest wish you could ever have is to, be safe in your August years, surrounded by family, and die peacefully in your bed. Now that sounds like an easy do, but for the entire course of human history, very few people actually got to do that. Now we can.
But the point is that I mean Ventura and Schwarzenegger, I think that deep down they've been caught up in the anti-Trump hysteria. That somehow by making these statements, by adopting these kinds of positions, they're taking part in a kind of the anti-Trump movement. They absolutely share the loathing and contempt for Trump of the kind of the political establishment. And so I think in some ways these statements that they come out with, it's in some ways it's about Trump. It's somehow they detest Trump, and they feel when they say these things, well, hey, I'm hitting Trump. I'm hitting the Trump supporters. I'm hitting MAGA.
Yeah, well, but the calculus that I just presented you works the same way. I mean, there's no downside by dumping on Trump. What's the downside?
None at all. None at all.
If you support Trump, is there any upside? Not much.
Not much.
But there's no downside by saying, do anybody but Trump. There's no downside by saying that.
Right. That's right. DJ 53144 asks you, Peter, where's Skippy?
In Russian, there's a word domik, and it comes from the word dome, which means home.
Home.
And he has a little home, which you diminutize it to domik. And so he's sleeping in his little domik right behind me here. Apple and I went out for lunch today, so he's really exhausted. Okay, because I take him to my favorite cafe, and he is like a celebrity there. All of the staff know his name. They bring him a little mat to stand on, usually to chew on. They bring him a bowl of water. And then they ask you, does he want some scraps? So they give me some steak. So he gets a little plate with steak on it, and everyone's, oh, it's so cute. Okay. Then he looks around at everyone, basically says, I'm Elvis, and you know it. And then he has a little bit of water. Then he curls up in a little ball, and he goes to sleep right next to me. That's what we do for lunch.
But that's very, very nice, because these scraps at a restaurant, that's still good food.
It's excellent food.
They don't offer this to humans, say, hey, we've got a little bit of steak. Would you like a little bit of steak? Sure. I'll take a little bit of a steak. No, you don't get that as a human, but as a dog, oh, okay, that's nice. A little bit of steak.
He eats well when he
eats very well. Yeah, and it's all free. We don't have to pay for any of that.
Well, what happens is that I kind of sit on like a couch bench. Okay, so like. I'll be sitting down, and where I'm sitting goes all the way to the end, so they're like 5 tables. And so most people, when they're sitting, you're kind of moving forward towards the table, correct, as you're eating your food. Well, Apple finds a way to go behind every single person till he gets to the end, and everybody's startled, like, what's going on right here? And it's this little tiny dog, okay? And so and he'll go right behind everyone, right again, run all the way to the very opposite end, and it's just people are just go gaga about it.
Anyway, thank you, DJ. Thank you for your generosity. Jenny, always very good to see you. We don't see you often enough, Jenny. Jenny has always had a very pithy way of expressing herself, very scabrous humor. So nice to see you again, Jenny. Thank you very much for your generosity. So anyway, where are we? And then again, okay.
I like this comment. American politics is a reality show nowadays, a reality show with nuclear weapons and the real danger of Armageddon. Where are the real politics nowadays? Really good point. When George and I were coming up, think of the 1980s, George, and the Pershing missiles that were going to be deployed in Germany. There was a real anti-war movement.
All right.
It was very serious. Okay, and there was what was the Threads, that name Threads, the day after.
The day after, yeah.
This is before these streaming services, but
right.
The threat of a nuclear holocaust was very real for George and I.
Yeah. Well, that was because particularly I was living in Europe at the time, and there were massive demonstrations. These were really millions of people were showing up. For
when the Greens were good people.
Exactly. And for a while, you had to sort of wonder whether it's going to happen. Because the demonstrations were in anticipation of the deployment of the missiles. And will this happen? Will basically the Americans really deploy these missiles? Because there's just such absolute outrage about this, and as you say, it was very serious. People arguing about these things. Wherever you went, you got into an argument about the missiles. Does this add to security? Does this make war more or less likely? This was everywhere. People were arguing like that, and then, but eventually the missiles were deployed.
But they're going to be redeployed.
They're going to be redeployed, and there's no protest. And that's the amazing thing.
There's no protest.
and it is because at the time, it was understandable that people were concerned. Whether you agreed with them or not, the CND, Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, and the European Nuclear Disarmament, the END, and they were obviously always attacked. Oh, that's a Soviet front. The communists are behind this and whatever. But nonetheless, their concerns were legitimate. You can definitely say, hey, I think these missiles are going to make war more likely, and we Europeans are going to be in the crosshairs. We're going to get clobbered, and then there'll be some kind of a peace deal signed between the Americans and the Russians. In the meantime, Europe will have been wiped out. That was a real concern. And now you're talking about deploying missiles in Germany, and there's no debate.
It's really interesting. We had a German guest on not so long ago, and he conveyed to us, and I think he's absolutely right, is that if you think of the 1980s, okay, well, that's like 35 some years after the end of the Second World War. Well, there are a lot of people that were alive in the mid-80s that remembered the Second World War, particularly in Germany. Okay. A lot of people still have that as a living memory. And now in 2024, look, everybody, NATO has invaded Russia. Right. Think of that.
Exactly.
NATO has invaded Russia, the Kursk region.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
And don't you think that the possibility of a nuclear exchange is more real now than it was in the 1980s? It is real more now than the 1980s.
Yeah. That's right, and that's when you say that NATO has invaded Russia, and then you think, well, why isn't this being debated in the U.S. presidential election? Do you support this? Ask Harris and ask Trump. Ask them that question. Do you support this? Do you think this was the right thing to do for Ukraine to invade Russia with American backing, American intelligence, because they couldn't have done it without American intelligence? You think this was the right thing to do? Is this good or bad for America? Just ask both of them, and then they never do. Exactly the kind of questions that should be coming up in a presidential election. Is this a good idea? Do you intend to do more of this, or do you think we should bring that to an end? And then no. So it is a kind of pointless theater. We're arguing about things that are of no intrinsic interest. I mean, this thing about the Arlington National Cemetery. What the hell are we doing, wasting time arguing about this stupid thing? It's like somebody has spilled some wine, and then we're arguing about whose fault was it that he spilled some wine. I mean, as if it matters one bit, as to who and whether was he at fault or was somebody else at fault for spilling.
Well, wait, but to use that analogy, but for sure, a poor person that's paid badly will clean it up.
Yes, exactly. That's right. That's exactly. And so, but that's and again, we've only got a couple of months of this, and then it's done. That's it, and then election over. You don't have to. We don't have to discuss this anymore, and we can just go ahead and do whatever we want to do without any.
Well, I mean, for everybody to understand, when George and I, we basically are covering the coverage, okay? Because if you ask me, is there any substance to this campaign? Of course there isn't. It's absurd. None. This is that's what is interesting about this campaign is its absurdity. Okay, I mean, CNN presents that as a interview. I mean, really?
Right.
And then to see people praise it, it's just like, it just. The divide is so very real because I have no idea how to communicate with these people. Okay, I'm aware of my senses. I can make see differences and differentiations. But if you say that was a stellar interview, then I don't know what we could possibly agree with.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, the other day I watched something on CNN, some show presided by Chris Wallace, who used to be at Fox News, and you had the usual panelists, Washington insiders, what's this Washington Post, Axios, Politico, and the strange thing is, if you listen, is that they're all in this bubble, and they all share the same assumptions, and and therefore they're just talking to one another, and you realize, well, 99.9999% of Americans don't share these assumptions. They have no idea what you're talking about. I mean, they really don't know, because it's all within this very narrow parameters, and that's why they argue about these issues, Arlington National. Oh, what about gun control? Oh, what about the policy about gun control? What about abortion? Arguing about this. I mean, there's so many other more important issues to discuss, but they're arguing because for them this is what's important.
Well, it's like the Biden administration's Ukraine policy. I mean, is he doing too much or is he doing too little? It's never mentioned as it's just wrong.
Okay? Yes, that's right. That's right. Exactly.
I see a question here. Peter, if you left Russia and visited any Western country, would you expect the same reception as Assange, Durov, etc.? Does your American citizenship count for anything, or am I under a completely wrong, I guess, assumption? I don't travel for the very reasons you wrote that. Bingo! You got it.
That's right. I think that's a really interesting question. Again, you have no idea. You could be stuck somewhere for months, years. So,
but see, George is absolutely right. Okay, do I fear that I could be arrested for doing something wrong? No, I haven't done anything wrong, so I'm not afraid of that. I'm afraid of the process of being arrested. Okay? Because I got dogs. I got family. I got
Yeah,
things
yeah,
to
yeah,
do.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
I can't
exactly.
take a 3 to 6 month year break.
Right.
Okay.
No, 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 no.
And you know, and you know, every time George and I do a live stream, another person has been picked off. Okay. Again, this is being normalized. Another person was detained. Another passport was taken. Someone was taken off an airplane. A SWAT team visited their house. This is turning into a daily thing.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. That's right. And what's kind of interesting is that after what happened to Durov, and then you get these threats. These are serious threats against Elon Musk
Musk.
from Robert Reich. He's not nobody. He's a former labor secretary. He's a columnist of the Guardian. He has a position at Berkeley. He just thinks that there's nothing at all wrong with saying, oh, I think he should be arrested. And then we've seen what Thierry Breton, again, not a nobody. He's an EU commissioner. He starts issuing these threats to Musk. And this is Musk. Musk, up until the moment when he took over Twitter, he was a widely, I mean, not exactly beloved figure, but he was a widely respected figure. I mean, people thought highly of him. You always generally got a positive media coverage. What he did with PayPal, and then with obviously with electric vehicles and SpaceX and so on. And now suddenly he's become this hated figure. That's targeted by the media, and the media, they're like attack dogs. They're like your dogs, Peter, only more ferocious. And they're all just going after him. And again, why? What's he done? All he's done is, he wants to create a free speech platform, and that's enough to put him in the serious crosshairs. If I were him, I'd be very careful about traveling anywhere in Europe. So.
I appreciate your gentle language, intimate search. Yeah, that would probably be awesome.
Yeah.
We got to get a moderator for the questions, George.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it. Because it's actually quite hard to go through them. Somebody has looked.
What I really find interesting, as you formulate the question, is I'm so appreciative of the people that come to these podcasts like this, these live streams, because it's such an interesting juxtaposition. There's a number of podcasters that I follow and I like, and what they experience is very the same thing that George and I experience. People want to know about what's going on in the world. Yep, okay, absolutely. It's so interesting. Because part of my job every single day, even though I'm on my last days of my vacation, is I constantly during the day is reading news, what's new, what's going on, and all that. And then when you come across mainstream media, you think about that it's an alternative reality that they're reporting on, or at least like George saying, or what Trump said visiting the families of the catastrophe with the withdrawal of Afghanistan. I mean, I feel for those people and their experience, obviously, but there are major wars going on. People are being impoverished. People are being arrested for speech, and as if that never really makes it in. And when it does, well, these people deserve it.
That's right. That's yeah. And Jenny again says, Blinken is a Zionist. Of course, he lies. It's like again. Let's not forget, Blinken when he went to Israel. I think a few days after October the 7th. and he said, "I come as a Jew." There was no need for him to say that. There's absolutely no reason for him to say that. But it showed right away his own.
Kissinger did that.
Kissinger never did. Exactly.
And he never would. He represented the United States. He was a German Jew that immigrated to the United States and made it to the summit of power and influence. He went there as an American.
That's right. That's right. But that's why it becomes very interesting. Why did Blinken say, essentially, I don't come here as as an American Secretary of State, as a representative of the U.S. government. I come here as a Jew. In other words, I come, as one of you, and therefore I identify entirely with you and not with the government that I'm supposed to be representing. That's and the people who have entrusted me with this position. So it was a very, very creepy thing, but it's been a consistent thread with Blinken.
That guy's legacy is sealed. I mean, there'll be an official narrative. He'll be at some think tank and he'll be, raking in, buckets of money.
A lot of money.
Okay. And he'll be feted at parties and everything. But, he will go down in history as one of the worst characters in modern political history. Weakest, feckless, a person with no moral compass whatsoever.
Right.
He presided over a genocide. That will be his legacy. He presided over a genocide that could have been stopped with a phone call.
Right. Yeah. That's right. But the interesting thing is, of course, that he will be making money. I mean, there's no question. He will. He's not just going to go to a think tank because, he will go to a think tank and he'll have a nice cushy existence. You don't do anything at a think tank. So supposedly you'll write a few op-eds a year, the New York Times and the Washington Post, but somebody's going to write them for you. You'll get an intern to write the op-eds for you. But what's important is that you're in part of this consultancy thing. That's where the money is, and he was making a lot of money before he became secretary.
Was it called West Wing?
Something like it. Yeah, I can't remember exactly, but it was one of these consultancies that open doors, which means you just make an awful lot of money. And then Jonathan says, if October the 7th was a murder case and Blinken was the lead detective, he would be removed from the investigation for conflict of interest. That's right. So.
Oh, that's an interesting question here. Peter, besides your studies in college that led you to Russia, was there anything you saw as prophetic about the path the USA was on during the 1980s and 90s that gave you a premonition of the things you ran out of space, things that we're witnessing now, I suppose? That's a really interesting question. I'm not really sure I'm in a position to answer it right now because I'd have to actually really think about it. To be honest with you, I was a real dyed-in-the-wool cold warrior, big time. Okay, I was a big-time cold warrior. My experience living in Poland in the 1980s really, really impacted me. So, at least when I was at university, your third year, you go abroad, and people go to Spain and they go to the UK and they go to France. And I went to Poland. Everybody's like, why are you going there? And it was a very eye-opening experience for me. What I appreciated was the Polish resistance to communism. I thought that was something I could learn from. I saw firsthand American meddling, even in Poland in the 1980s, and I got a little squeamish about that because I was kind of naive. I said, let the Polish people decide what they want, okay, and they'll make the right decision. But then some of the machinations and shenanigans I saw going on, I thought that was completely unnecessary and probably would lead to a bad result. And then when the communist regime in Poland ended, I went back as a Fulbright scholar for 2 years, and it was very interesting to see what had changed and what not had changed, and this really this fanatically pro-Americanism was something I thought was completely misplaced, naive, but it was okay. It's cute. It's nice. Okay, and I was an American. All right, and just the hatred of Russia, which I never really had. I didn't like the Soviet Union, but I really loved Russian culture, Russian music, ballet, the whole works. I mean, I'm mesmerized by Dostoevsky's my favorite author. And so I started seeing how that was kind of, because going from like self-determination, that's something that, I thought was fair enough. I saw the Soviet bases, that's where they were. But even there, even when I lived there, I said, but there were American bases in Germany. Okay, remember, there's a little bit of equality.
But I think that what the question is talking about, what you saw as prophetic about the path the US was on during the 80s and 90s. So, and that's, I think, a very interesting question, because, up until, let's say, the end of the Cold War, last year of Ronald Reagan, you're saying, well, okay, yeah, I'm supporting America and so on, because, well, communism is a bad thing, the Soviet Union is a bad thing. But now that it's gone, then you say, well, okay, well, that's it. It's gone, and let everybody just do whatever they want to do. Let Russia be Russia, let Poland be Poland. We don't have to do anything more. That's it. It's gone. And then suddenly there was that Paul Wolfowitz's famous memo. He was then a very powerful
full
figure.
Spectrum dominance. Yeah.
Full spectrum dominance. He was the head of the I think it's something like number 3 in the State Department. He had the same position that Victoria Nuland had under Biden. He was head of that policy planning staff. And he said, yeah, full spectrum dominance. We have to make sure that we are dominant on every continent on the globe. And that became a very different. So suddenly, hey, so it's not about communism. It's not about communism. No. It's something about very different. It's now about American hegemony. And you think, well, no, that's not it. I never signed on for that. No, I know what American dominance. Yeah, I signed on for fighting against communism, resisting the Soviet Union, but not about American dominance. And I think that really set America on a particular course. So even though Wolfowitz came and went, though he made a comeback under the younger Bush, but I think that's really what's important, and that became very, very ominous, because that's the goal that America pursued since the early 1990s.
Yeah, and as a follow-up, and a question that I just see right now, was I pro-Gorby? I could remember with the late Martin Melia, who was a professor of Russian studies at Berkeley. I was a graduate student under him, and he wrote his famous article, Mr. X, signed Mr. X, Z, excuse me,
Z, called it Z, yeah.
George F. Kennan's article was signed
X. X, exactly.
And I was kind of like his proofreader, confessor, because we went through the draft over and over. I'm his graduate student. I had to work for him reading this draft that went into foreign affairs later on. And we had a lot of talk about. We talked a lot about Gorbachev. I was always kind of suspicious, not because I didn't think he had goodwill. I just didn't. Where does he get the knowledge and the finesse to do this? I mean, he's a communist apparatchik. I mean, he doesn't know what he's dealing with. He doesn't understand the country that wanted his country's demise, and they suddenly are nice people. I don't think that's a very smart move. And Martin Melian, much to his credit, he basically said, yeah, I mean, he said, I'm not anti-Gorbachev, but I don't think he's the right guy, okay, which he ended up being right. I ended up being right too, maybe in a different way. But
that was the thing with Gorbachev, is that, he had a talent. He had a talent for intrigue and infighting. I mean, and that's, he knew how he knew how to get rid of all his enemies. I mean, all the people who opposed him were eliminated one after another, so all he had around him were basically his acolytes. But he himself was a kind of an emptiness at the core, because he didn't have any idea where he was going. He was just going from one radical institutional change to another without thinking through the consequences. And you can't just simply toss one thing aside and say, oh, well, we'll start something new. We'll have a constitutional assembly, and then we'll just have a kind of a referendum and decide what we're going to do. I mean, you can't do that. I mean, these are institutions. They take a long time to set up, and you can't. And he was just simply shuffling them around, and of course, the whole thing just collapsed. And
plus George, it wasn't about politics. No. It wasn't about free speech. It wasn't about civil society. All these pieties you hear in the West. It was about the economy. Stupid. How to make this economy work. And that was secondary. Perestroika, as they called it. Glasnost was what everybody wanted. Oh, let's bring out the corpse of Stalin. That's all fine. Let's get that done later if you want. No, that's your country, your history, your culture. Go right ahead. But let's deal with the here and now, and that's what they didn't do.
Right.
Okay. Right. Gorbachev just didn't have the brain work to do it.
Yeah.
Okay. No, and George is right. When you spend your entire career fighting off your rivals so you can get the next step up the ladder, that doesn't give you the skills to run a country.
No. That's right. It's like finally he got rid of all of them, all of the Ligachev and Romanov and all those names from the past who are now long forgotten. He got rid of them all. And then he had no idea what he was going to do. Just thought, I'll just shuffle around from one thing to.
It's like at the end of the Candidate with Robert Redford, the last scene when they're in the taxi. He says, "Now that you've won," and he says, "What do I do now?"
That's right. What do we do now? Yeah, that's right. All right, Peter. I think we're done. I think we've answered a lot of questions. Thank you, everybody who has joined us. Thank you so much for all of your comments. We didn't get to all of them because it's kind of hard to go through all of them, but thank you. We tried to get to as many as we could. Please join us next Monday at the same time, and maybe the dogs are going to show up. Who knows? But anyway, thank you, and we'll see you same time next. Oh, look at that. Yeah. Yes, that's right. Yeah. I say he needs his money. I mean, he's not interested in money. He's very determined in his outlook. Anyway, thank you so much. See you next Monday. All the best. Happy Labor Day. Bye-bye.